Hello, Eastview Scholars, and welcome to this edition of Sharp Shorts, where we talk histology. That's the study of tissues, which is not being an expert on Puffs or Kleenex, but knowing the types of tissues that create the organs and the organ systems in your body. Okay, and by definition here, we have it highlighted here. Histology is the study of tissues. Tissues are a group of cells with similar structure and function, plus, and this is the thing that people forget about, the extracellular substances located between the cells, because the cells themselves, of course, are absolutely important. But as we get to talking about connective tissue, you'll see that as important are the proteins, the fluids, and all the stuff around. And yes, they are for epithelial also. These all have varying layers or varying amounts of extracellular tissue or substances. But anyhow, it will be most important when we talk about connective tissue. We will not spend a lot of time. In fact, this tutorial is just going to talk about epithelial tissue. We're not going to spend a lot of time. We'll do the basics of what muscular tissue and nervous tissue are, but since we look at those systems as a whole, we'll cover more when we get there. So this first tutorial will be on epithelial tissue, and then we'll have another one specifically on connective tissue. Okay. Epithelial tissue is one of, between epithelium and pervasive connective tissue, you're looking at the two that are pervasive throughout the body and just about a part of everything. Epithelium covers the surface of the body or forms glands. It is the membranes, it's the skin, it's all the coverings of your body. You can see by this picture, it's showing you different types: squamous, cuboidal, stratified, simple. So that's really the function of it, as we're going to see, is both protection and transport, or allowing things to diffuse through as part of its protective feature and its permeability. Most epithelial cells have a basement membrane, which they are connected to, that connects them to the tissue below, and generally that is connective tissue, as we'll talk about in that tutorial. And then they have a free surface or an apical surface on the top. Okay. And here's the function. And they're both kind of protective, but you can control the passage of what gets in and out. And also it's a covering. It's a membranous covering. We talked about serous membranes and the fluid in between and stuff, but it's a protective layer. Okay. Epithelia are classified really in two manners, the layers and the shapes. So simple consists of one layer, stratified consists of more than one layer, and the shapes are squamous, cuboidal, and columnar, for flat, cube, and tall. And what we'll see as we go through this is the complexity of those cells and the complexity that make up that tissue increases as you go from squamous to columnar. Okay. Simple squamous epithelial cells, you can see here by the cartoon that it is just a single layer of flat cells. You find them like here in the alveoli of the lungs, and squamous gives you the idea that they are there to allow transport, especially in the lungs, diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide rather easily. That would include other nutrients and stuff depending on where it is. That is also in the stratified layer, the coverings and stuff like your skin and in your esophagus, where you would be rubbing often, and these can just scrape right off. Squamous cells become squamous. As they develop, they normally start as, say, cuboidal cells, and then as they progress in a stratified manner, as they progress through their development, as we'll see with skin, then they shed their internal organelles and become more of a protective feature. Okay, but right now we'll continue with simple. Here's a diagram of simple cuboidal. Again, cube-like shape, produce carrier molecules ATP. They can do some secretion. So more so than squamous, that are really there for allowing things to diffuse through a single layer easily, or that can protect you by scraping off and being replaced. These now have secretory functions, as you can see, found in kidney tubules to regulate reabsorbing and excreting of waste, etc., and movement of materials. And there's a good picture right there. Okay. Simple columnar cells, you can see, and again, basement membrane, apical surface, but you can see they're tall. They are the most complex because not only do they do some secretion, but they also do absorption. So a step up from cuboidal cells in that they have more complex functions. They have to notice things. You find these a lot, like here in the digestive system, with all the different chemicals that are being broken down and stuff. They need to be more complex with the receptors and the enzymes and the stuff that they release. Okay. Sometimes you may find ciliated portions of it in areas, which just means they're allowed to have some movements. Now here's the stratified, and this is what I was talking about back earlier, is notice that they start somewhat cuboidal in the stratified layer, but this is more than one layer, and it's always named from what types of cells are at the apical surface. Okay. Like for example, this would be in your esophagus because it's non-keratinized. So as you were to eat food and it scraped the esophagus, you could scrape these off as that bolus of food rolled through, but still stay protected. But they start in a more cuboidal. They start losing their structure as they go, their internal organelles, till they flatten out and just become flat protective layers. Now, a couple that don't quite fit the mode that we were talking about, and there is also stratified cuboidal and stratified columnar. So for the sake of the length of the tutorial, we're not really going to discuss them, but they have functions also. You have transitional. And I'll point out right now that as you look at what you have here, you know, it kind of looks cuboidal. The difficulty in histology isn't understanding the tissues, it's looking at the micrographs and the other types of photos that you have and identifying what you have. What makes transitional very special is that it can stretch. The cells themselves can actually stretch, and you find this in your bladder. Okay? And our other non-simple stratified cuboidal type stuff is the pseudostratified epithelium, oftentimes ciliated, as you can see here. This would be lining your trachea. The cilia then, with the mucus that is protecting the opening to the environment, that would trap dirt, dust, and the cilia would move and then allow that mucus and all that stuff to be moved out, and then you can spit it out, or your body keeps it moving so it doesn't become stagnant and infectious. Here you can see the basement membrane. What you can see with these is it appears to be layered, but it is not, because not all the cells go from basement membrane to the apical surface. So it is still a single layer, which allows for the diffusion and transport of materials, but it appears to be stratified in somewhat of a protective measure, but again, where you often find these things in the respiratory area and stuff like that, you have that thin mucus layer kind of covering the top, maybe some cilia and stuff like that, to keep infections from happening. Anyhow, that is our quick start to histology and epithelial tissue, and in our next installment we will talk connective tissue. Scholar up, Eastview.